Imagine stepping outside your living pod and immediately joining a slow-moving sea of bodies packed shoulder to shoulder. This isn't just in the streets, but on vertical walkways layered 50 stories high. The air is thick with recycled breath. Privacy is a forgotten myth. The sky above is obscured by colossal superstructures stretching endlessly into the clouds. And beneath your feet, entire cities run miles underground, humming with human activity. This isn't a dystopian fantasy. This is Earth, with 100 billion people. The current global population hovers around 8 billion, and we're already feeling the pressure. This includes food insecurity, housing shortages, and ecosystem collapse. But what if that number didn't just grow? What if it exploded? What if, in a not-so-distant future, our planet housed 100 billion human beings? This is more than 10 times today's population. In this terrifyingly dense future, the Earth is pushed far past its natural carrying capacity. Every inch of land is optimized. Every breath you take is shared with hundreds. The question isn't just how we'd live, it's whether life would still feel like living at all. In this video, we're going to explore a future shaped by absolute human saturation. This ranges from mega-arcologies and vanishing nature to authoritarian oversight and the psychological breakdown of society. Because when population explodes to this level, freedom, comfort, and even individuality may be the first things to go. So let's start with what your daily life would look like. This is inside a towering human hive where privacy is extinct and space is a luxury no one can afford. By the time Earth's population hits 100 billion, traditional cities no longer exist. There's simply no room. The horizontal sprawl that defined urban expansion for centuries has become impossible. Instead, humanity has turned vertical, unimaginably vertical. Towering megastructures hundreds of stories high dominate the landscape. These aren't buildings, they're self-contained cities, known as arcologies, architectural ecologies engineered to house millions of people each. Every arcology stretches like a pillar into the stratosphere, layered like a cake of compressed human activity. The lower floors serve as industrial zones, filled with automated manufacturing plants and waste processing units. The middle tiers contain schools, hospitals, and communal service hubs, while the upper levels are reserved for housing. These are packed with coffin-sized sleeping pods, stacked by the thousands, accessed through narrow corridors barely wide enough for two people to pass. But space isn't just a luxury, it's a political asset. In this world, square footage equals status. The wealthiest elites live on the very top floors. This offers closer access to real sunlight, fresher air, and views that aren't just the concrete face of the neighboring arcology. Below them, a cascade of socioeconomic classes compress into ever smaller, darker, noisier conditions. Public areas are anything but relaxing. Massive concourses teem with human traffic, guided by crowd-controlled AI systems that dictate movement flows in real time. Escalators are timed, hallway lighting pulses in rhythms to nudge direction. Even the pace at which you walk can be enforced. Lag too far behind in a movement corridor and you risk being pushed or fined. In such density, privacy no longer exists. Personal dwellings are rarely larger than a closet, with shared bathrooms, communal kitchens, and monitored recreation zones. Conversations are heard, tracked, and recorded by default. Personal thoughts, ironically, are the only private thing left. And even that's changing as neural interfaces start interpreting emotional states and thoughts in real time. Transportation systems have also transformed. There are no cars, only vertical transit tubes, and high-speed elevators that operate like blood vessels, pulsing humans up and down through the arcologies. For intercity travel, people use maglev pods shot through vacuum tunnels underground or through overhead hyperloops that snake between arcologies like metal arteries in the sky. And what about the outdoors? There really isn't any. At ground level, open space is either fully industrialized or reserved for the global logistics grid. This includes drones, trucks, and underground freighters. Parks, forests, beaches. Those are no longer features of the natural world but simulated experiences, projected on VR domes or built into artificial nature chambers on designated rest levels. You book a slot for 10 minutes of virtual forest exposure, and that's assuming you have the credits. Children in this world are raised not with backyards, but with vertical play farms. These are tiered, color-coded maze structures wrapped in digital screens, showing blue skies they'll never actually see. Play is supervised, regulated, and rationed to avoid noise, pollution, and energy strain. From above, the Earth's surface glows with city-light grids and shimmering corridors of human activity. There are no dark places left, no wild forests, no untouched tundra, no quiet. The whole world pulses like a machine built solely for the preservation of a single species. And in this crowded hive of humanity, something else quietly disappears. Solitude. There is nowhere to be alone, nowhere to reflect, nowhere to hear your own thoughts without the buzz of 100 billion voices humming all around you. But if space is tight, imagine what it takes to feed, hydrate, and manage the waste of this ocean of people. Up next, we dive into the brutal logistics of survival in a planet-sized pressure cooker. Feeding 8 billion people is already a global challenge. It pushes agriculture, transportation, and economics to the edge. Now multiply that by over 12. In a world of 100 billion humans, food, water, and waste management don't just become logistical puzzles. They become existential crises. Agriculture as we know it is gone. There's no open farmland, no rolling wheat fields or orchards. Every square inch of arable land has been repurposed. The green spaces that once fed nations are now paved over, buried beneath layers of infrastructure. So instead, food is produced vertically in colossal nutrient recycling towers. These are mega farms where crops grow in stacked trays under synthetic lighting powered by nuclear fusion or high-efficiency solar grids. But even these aren't enough. So humanity turns to lab-grown sustenance. This includes synthetic meats, fungal proteins, and algae-based meal cubes. Every calorie is measured. Every ingredient is engineered to maximize yield per molecule. Personalized nutrient blends are delivered through automated dispensers, tailored to your genetic profile and activity level. Food is no longer a cultural experience. It's fuel. It's efficient, calculated, and cold. Traditional cooking. It survives only in elite zones, preserved as art or entertainment, not sustenance. To the masses, the idea of preparing your own food is antiquated and wasteful, like lighting a bonfire to warm your home. Now, consider water. With oceans increasingly contaminated and natural reservoirs depleted or privatized, most of the planet's freshwater is now recycled urine and atmospheric condensate, cleaned and filtered 1,000 times over. Every building has its own water purification circuit. You drink what your neighbors exhale. Rainwater is rare. Surface water is non-potable. Drinking from a river is unthinkable. There are hardly any rivers left. In this ultra-compressed society, waste is currency. Nothing is discarded. Human waste is instantly processed into usable components. Organic matter is broken into fertilizer for vertical farms or fuel for bioreactors. Plastics are shredded, restructured, and reassigned. Metal is endlessly melted and reformed. You don't throw something away. There is no away. Trash doesn't exist. Only material in transition. But despite all this precision, waste still accumulates, because 100 billion people leave a footprint no system can fully contain. Overflow zones, massive, shielded cavities under the Earth's crust, act as global septic vaults, constantly compressed and mineralized to avoid collapse. One glitch in this system, one power failure, one act of sabotage, and entire regions could be buried in biological fallout within hours. The pressure to keep everything moving, clean, and consumable is so high that accidents are ruthlessly punished. A worker caught contaminating a food line, a technician who lets waste filtration levels dip. These aren't minor mistakes. They're classed as threats to planetary stability. And in this future, that usually means removal, exile, or worse. Meanwhile, the black market thrives. Illicit steaks, real fruit, fresh spring water harvested from ancient aquifers, all sold at prices only the upper caste can afford. There's a mystique to eating an apple from an actual tree, a status symbol so potent that it could get you arrested if you're not part of the privileged minority. But this isn't just about sustenance. Food rituals are gone. Shared meals, cultural dishes, family dinners, all sacrificed on the altar of necessity. Instead, mealtimes are staggered, timed, and solitary. You stand in a nutrition booth, swallow your ration paste, and step out. It's efficient, clean, and empty. The same goes for sanitation. With public waste demands at astronomical levels, most people don't have personal bathrooms. Instead, Entire floors of arcologies are reserved for synchronized sanitation waves. These are shifts where thousands of people use communal units in precisely timed sessions. Get in, clean up, get out. It's hygienic, it's monitored, but it's deeply dehumanizing. You're a number, a body, a variable in a system. Survival is possible, barely, but the richness of life, flavor, celebration, spontaneity has been ground into the paste along with your dinner. And as food becomes formula and water becomes vapor, something else vanishes: nature itself. Up next, we'll explore what happens when the natural world disappears and Earth becomes a planet solely for humans and nothing else. In the age of 100 billion humans, nature no longer exists as a living, autonomous system. It has been replaced, not preserved, by synthetic approximations. Forests are memories, deserts are resource fields, oceans are industrial zones, and animals, they are extinct, engineered, or imprisoned in biovaults for research or luxury consumption. To make room for endless megastructures, ecosystems were sacrificed en masse. The Amazon rainforest, once the lungs of the planet, has long since been transformed into a sprawling grid of arcologies and industrial water processors. Africa's savannas became solar farms. The Arctic is a refrigerated storage zone for deep earth fusion batteries. There is no wilderness, only function. Wildlife sanctuaries, they are replaced with eco-museums. These are enclosed domes housing curated replicas of extinct ecosystems. You book a ticket, you walk past glass panels, you smell programmed air that mimics forest scent. From chemical libraries, a mechanical bird chirps. A robot panther sleeps behind a synthetic bush. It's all simulation, and everyone knows it. The real biosphere, the one that evolved independently of us, has been erased in the name of survival. A single hectare of untouched forest was simply too inefficient. Every tree not converted into oxygen processors, biomass, or construction material was a wasted opportunity in a world desperate for space and breathability. Even the air is fabricated. What we inhale is managed by global climate servers that balance oxygen and nitrogen and trace elements through a lattice of geoengineering satellites. If those fail, mass suffocation begins within hours. There's no buffer, no fallback. Earth's natural resilience was traded away centuries ago. Children in this future grow up disconnected from the natural order. They don't play with bugs. They don't see birds in flight. Most have never touched soil. Their concept of tree is a digital model. It is interactive, gamified, and educational. Nature is part of history class, not lived experience. This loss carries deeper consequences than ecological collapse. It alters the human psyche. Historically, nature was a place of reflection, mystery, danger, and beauty. It balanced us, humbled us, inspired religions, myths, philosophies. But now, the only thing to fear is ourselves. Our scale, our noise, our machinery, our endless presence. The spiritual void is palpable. Ancient cultures that once worshipped rivers and mountains now turn toward AI deities, virtual temples, and digital avatars of extinct gods. Pilgrimages are made not to holy lands, but to reconstructed forests inside giant cylinders orbiting Earth. These are fragments of what once was. This extinction of the natural world isn't just physical, it's cultural. Entire traditions vanish. Farming customs, seasonal festivals, indigenous rituals tied to the land, all lost. In their place, new cultural anchors emerge, built around hyperurban life. This includes the anniversary of your first pod assignment, drone racing leagues, and synchronized fasting cycles to reduce global nutrient loads. For the ultra-rich, however, nature is still accessible, artificially. Billionaire eco-preserves float in the sky or orbit the Earth, housing real trees, clean rivers, and genetically resurrected animals. These private Edens are protected by military-grade security, hidden from everyone else. They are the new symbols of absolute power, ownership of what humanity destroyed. But for the other 99.9%, nature is only experienced through screens, or perhaps as ancient warnings. Drones fly through empty rainforests preserved in underground cryovaults, broadcasting footage to children who've never felt a breeze unfiltered by air conditioning. And in all of this, the human condition changes. Without seasons, without weather, without the unpredictability of wildness, people become mechanized in spirit. The rhythms of nature that once governed time, rest, and renewal are replaced by 24/7 productivity. Time is set by algorithms, not sunrises. Sleep is optimized, not natural. Even love and childbirth are scheduled. The loss of nature is not just about extinction, it's about isolation. Humanity becomes an echo chamber, alone with its own noise, its own needs, its own dominance. There is nothing left to contrast against. The mirror is no longer balanced by anything wild, anything unknowable. But as the planet is stripped of nature and rebuilt into a vast human machine, one question remains. How does the human mind survive in such a compressed, artificial existence? Next, we explore the crushing psychological effects of this crowded future, and how even your identity might be assigned, not chosen. In a world with 100 billion people, your sense of self is the first casualty. Imagine being 1 in 100 billion, statistically insignificant, completely replaceable. Your name, your face, your personality, all vanish into the endless data stream of humanity. In this tightly wound future, identity becomes systematized, assigned, streamlined, because in a world of this scale, individuality is a logistical burden. Work, once a symbol of purpose and achievement, is now a mandatory assignment doled out by central resource algorithms. You're not asked what you want to do, you're told what society needs, and slotted into it. You might operate filtration controls, monitor energy grids, or even manage morale metrics in your arcologies mental health hub. But you don't choose. You're selected based on aptitude scans and societal load requirements. The system ensures everyone has a function, but it comes at a cost. Autonomy. There's no room for dreamers, rebels, or wanderers. The poet becomes a hologram technician. The explorer becomes a database sorter. Artists, their creativity is channeled into government-sponsored simulation content or propaganda visuals, all under tight restrictions to prevent emotional destabilization. Worse, most jobs are menial and deeply repetitive. These are necessary cogs in an enormous system that must run without friction. You might spend a decade running maintenance diagnostics on water pressure valves, sitting in a dark control room with no human contact, not because you're being punished, but because that's the only available work slot. And yet, unemployment is illegal. Every citizen is contractually bound to a productivity cycle. Fail to contribute and you're reclassified as a non-functional unit, and possibly relocated to rehabilitation zones or merged into AI-supervised labor blocks. So what does this do to the human mind? First comes anxiety, the constant fear of falling behind, of being flagged as inefficient, of missing your cognitive updates or failing an emotional audit. Mental health becomes an industrial sector, with millions employed just to keep the population stable enough to continue functioning. You're required to check in daily with mood trackers, brainwave monitors, and behavioral AI. Smile too little, and you get flagged for corrective therapy. Cry in public, and you're isolated for re-evaluation. Then comes depersonalization, with everyone wearing identical uniforms, living in identical pods, and following identical routines. People begin to lose their sense of being unique. Even your thoughts can feel borrowed, influenced by the curated feeds and emotional regulators that pulse into your neural implants. There's no mystery, no spontaneity, just inputs and outputs. Relationships are no escape. Intimacy is rationed. Pairings are often algorithmic, optimized for psychological compatibility and to diverse genetics. Long-term love, a luxury. Families, assigned maximum sizes. Parenting requires a license. And in most cases, children are raised communally in social units, designed to streamline upbringing and eliminate emotional volatility. Religious or philosophical beliefs, once a source of meaning, are viewed with suspicion. Personal ideologies that deviate too far from the stability doctrine are considered dangerous. Spiritual practices are replaced with state-sanctioned mindful productivity routines, designed to mimic meditation while reinforcing compliance. Even death is dehumanized, with population control so strict, funerals are virtual. These are live-streamed ceremonies attended by avatars. The body is repurposed immediately, recycled into energy, nutrients, or building material. You don't get a grave, you get a barcode in the remembrance cloud. If you're lucky. So how do people survive emotionally? Some don't. Exits, while technically minimized through surveillance, still happens, quietly, efficiently, and often unnoticed. Others retreat into escapist simulation chambers, spending entire free cycles immersed in custom-built fantasy realms where they can pretend to be alone, or important, or free. But even those experiences are time-limited and monitored. A rare few adapt by dissolving their egos, embracing the collective identity, becoming hyper-loyal to the state, surrendering fully to their assigned purpose. These individuals are rewarded, promoted, sometimes even venerated as exemplars of sustainable citizenship. But the truth is darker. They've been conditioned to abandon the self entirely. In a world packed so tightly with people, the greatest rebellion is to feel something real, to think something original, to believe you matter. But in a world where 100 billion souls must be managed, even thinking freely becomes dangerous. Up next, we examine how this society governs itself, and why democracy has likely given way to something far more centralized and far more controlling. In a world of 100 billion people, governance by consent is a relic of the past. With such an enormous population, one where every moment, every breath, every resource must be tightly managed, democracy becomes a logistical impossibility. Voting, public discourse, deliberation, these slow, chaotic processes are simply incompatible with the velocity of survival required. In their place, a new system rises, one based not on representation, but directive efficiency. At the core of this regime is a global central authority, a hybrid governance structure run by a combination of AI bureaucratic megastructures and elite human technocrats. It spans the entire planet, operating under a single mandate: preserve stability at all costs. This is not a government that negotiates, it calculates. Laws are not passed. They're updated in real time by predictive governance models that simulate human behavior across millions of variables. Civil liberties, rights, and freedoms are dynamically weighted against sustainability metrics and social coherence indexes. If personal expression drops collective productivity by even a fraction of a percent, it's reclassified as non-constructive behavior and quietly restricted. Surveillance is total. Every person is equipped, voluntarily or not, with bio-integrated tracking implants. These devices monitor location, mood, speech, and even intention via brainwave pattern recognition. Your thoughts are not private. If you dream of rebellion, the system knows. Freedom of speech still technically exists. Within a set of approved emotional ranges and topic clusters, you can express discontent, but only in ways that reinforce collective problem-solving. Sarcasm, irony, dark humor, all flagged as destabilizing unless carefully formatted and tagged with disclaimers. Education is standardized and centrally distributed. Children are taught not just information, but behavior, obedience, algorithms, crowd navigation, data hygiene. Critical thinking is encouraged, but only within state-approved frameworks. You are allowed to question how, but not why. Punishments to have evolved. Prisons would be spatially inefficient and resource-draining. Instead, dissidents are often reassigned to lower-function industrial roles, relocated to mental reconditioning districts, or have their digital identities partially revoked, locking them out of housing, food, and communication services. This isn't incarceration. It's non-existence. And while resistance movements do exist, they are fragmented, ephemeral, and almost always virtual. Underground networks try to exchange forbidden books, simulate banned ideologies, or reintroduce extinct religious practices, but the system is built to anticipate rebellion. Most uprisings are crushed before they begin, neutralized by psychological profiling that predicts insurgency days in advance. Elections, they're ceremonial, a psychological pressure valve. Citizens vote on visual design updates to government buildings, or on the next model of their sanitation drones. But policy, power, and planetary decisions, those lie with the directive core. A class of hyperrelic decision-makers whose faces are rarely seen, whose names are algorithmically generated, and whose authority is backed not by public support, but by data supremacy. This form of rule isn't evil by design, it's utilitarian. With 100 billion lives hanging in the balance, this form of rule isn't evil by design, it's utilitarian. With 100 billion lives hanging in the balance, every decision must be optimized for speed, compliance, and survivability, but that necessity becomes a justification for absolute control, a closed loop of governance where individual freedom is sacrificed on the altar of collective function. There is no revolution coming, no tipping point, because the system doesn't break, it adapts. The moment cracks appear, it reforms them, evolves, incorporates resistance into its next version, and people, overwhelmed by their own insignificance, mostly comply, not out of loyalty, but because there's simply no alternative, no ungoverned spaces, no exiles, no frontier left to run to. Earth is one entity, one organism, and its nervous system is authoritarian by design. But even under a unified rule, cultures still smolder, languages clash, old beliefs refuse to die. Up next, we dive into the compressed, conflicted world of cultural identity, where diversity either merges or detonates. In a world with 100 billion people, culture cannot breathe freely. There is simply too much pressure, not just physical, but ideological. For most of history, human diversity was shaped by geography, oceans, mountains, and borders carved distinct languages, customs, and belief systems. But in a planet entirely urbanized, where megacities stretch across continents and billions of people live in vertical towers, geography no longer separates us. Cultures are forced into constant collision every second of every day. The result isn't harmony, it's compression. Language, once one of the most defining elements of identity, is now a logistical barrier. There are simply too many dialects, too much linguistic noise. So the global central authority mandates a universal communication protocol, an engineered language, stripped of nuance and optimized for clarity and digital parsing. It's precise, efficient, but emotionless. Your birth language is preserved technically, as part of your heritage capsule, a locked digital archive you can access during leisure hours, but using it in public, speaking your mother tongue aloud in a transit corridor or control room, is discouraged, flagged as inefficient and possibly dissident. Religions, too, undergo forced metamorphosis. Most spiritual systems, rooted in ancient environments and tribal identities, struggled to survive in this sterile, collective world. Some faiths adapt, becoming digital, uploading their holy texts into AI interpreters that deliver sermons in bite-sized motivational chunks. Others fuse together, blending beliefs into syncretic frameworks that satisfy spiritual cravings without causing political unrest. But many simply fade, with no nature to reference, no quiet, no private time. The sacred is drowned out by the industrial hum of civilization. Still, culture resists compression, and this resistance is dangerous. Every arcology has its own subcultures, formed from shared experience and proximity. Some are harmless, fashion trends, slang dialects, micro-hobbies. Others act as catalysts for conflict, secret movements reviving banned philosophies, reinterpreting ancient nationalism, or weaponizing forgotten myths to carve out identity in a place designed to erase it. These groups don't seek political power, they seek meaning, and meaning, in a system of pure order, is inherently subversive. Conflict, then, becomes inevitable. Not open warfare, there's no room for that, but ideological skirmishes, subtle sabotage, cultural mimetic viruses, information riots, a mass hunger strike triggered by the rediscovery of a forgotten martyr. In response, the global central authority imposes cultural quarantine protocols. Cultural data must be pre-approved, personal expression must be tagged, ranked, and balanced against local emotional climate scores. Even art becomes regulated, filtered through complexity thresholds to avoid emotional overload or philosophical confusion. This doesn't kill culture, it mutates it. Music, for example, becomes algorithmically collaborative. You plug into a neural groove feed and co-compose a track with 1,000 other people at once. Clothing shifts into programmable fabrics, changing styles based on your social metrics and the local ideological weather. Storytelling is condensed into 30-second immersive thought bursts. Anything longer risks inefficiency. Romance, rewritten as behavioral compatibility contracts. Ritual, replaced by synchrony events. Massive state-orchestrated participation moments designed to simulate collective emotion without chaos. Think synchronized crying, global laugh breaks, mass empathy drills. But even under all this pressure, some ancient symbols refuse to die. a whisper of the Koran in a quiet hallway, a hidden tattoo of the Torah beneath a factory jumpsuit, a contraband scroll of Buddhist scripture passed between family members. These small acts become dangerous forms of rebellion, not because they incite violence, but because they remind people that there used to be more than units of population. The irony: the system wants some culture to survive, enough to provide flavor, morale, a sense of belonging, but not enough to inspire revolution. It's a tightrope. Keep the people entertained, engaged, pacified, but never empowered. In the end, identity becomes fluid, not by choice, but by necessity. You are a mosaic of sanctioned beliefs, approved memories, and optimized expressions. You can celebrate your heritage during designated culture hours, but only within limits. Too much pride becomes tribalism. Too much difference becomes danger. But even as the human spirit strains under this cultural compression, Earth itself begins to crack. The systems holding everything together are at their limit. And now, the question becomes, do we expand or do we implode? Up next, humanity's final options: terraforming, forced sterilization, or collapse. At 100 billion people, Earth is no longer a planet. It's a pressure chamber. Every system is stretched to its breaking point. Every breath, every heartbeat is counted. And now, even with global control, full surveillance, synthetic resources, and sterilized culture, the seams are splitting. The most advanced simulations show a terrifying truth: Earth cannot hold this weight forever. The carbon cycle, already synthetically maintained, is teetering. The atmospheric processes are running at 99.8% capacity. Oceanic dead zones span nearly every former sea. The core logistics algorithms flag it clearly. Collapse is not a question of if, but when. So humanity begins to turn outward. But space, once imagined as a romantic frontier, is now a last resort. A lifeboat for a species gasping in its own exhaust. Colonization plans are launched, not as grand missions of exploration, but as emergency dispersal operations. The Moon becomes a manufacturing colony. Mars is partially terraformed with aggressive geobioengineering, flooded with atmosphere-generating bacteria and reflective orbital mirrors. Giant O'Neill cylinders are constructed in space, orbital habitats that can house tens of millions each. But here's the truth: these efforts are too slow. The bottleneck isn't technology, it's scale. Moving 100 billion humans, even fractionally, is a cosmic nightmare. Entire industries are dedicated to building and launching colony ships. But at current output, it would take over 5,000 years just to relocate 10% of the population. So Earth's leadership explores a different option: forced population stabilization. Not just birth control, not just sterilization, but active population reduction protocols. That's the euphemism. In practice, it means mass euthanasia disguised as post-functional retirement. Citizens deemed emotionally unstable, unproductive, or genetically redundant are gently funneled into a final phase of life. It's marketed as transcendence, a peaceful offboarding, but everyone knows it's quiet liquidation. Public resistance is minimal. By now, most people understand. For the rest to live, some must not. Simultaneously, terraforming ramps up. Earth's poles are injected with reflective nanomaterials to manage planetary temperature. Gigantic orbital lenses bounce sunlight into engineered jungles in the Sahara and Siberia. Atmospheric filters are seeded with reactive particles to control carbon, methane, and radiation. But these fixes are temporary, because the truth is, Earth was never designed for this. The planet evolved for ecosystems, not a monolithic swarm of thinking meat. And so, the unthinkable begins to surface. Earth itself may need to be abandoned. 1,000 years from now, historians, if they still exist, may look back and see this moment as the great pivot point, when humanity accepted that the planet it loved could no longer love it back. The final contingency is chilling, a protocol codenamed EXOVAC. If systems collapse too fast, and planetary stability is lost, billions will be sealed into cryogenic vaults deep beneath the surface, waiting for relocation to new worlds. The rest will be left behind. In this world, humanity doesn't thrive. It endured, not for joy, not for exploration, but out of sheer mathematical obligation to continue existing. And that obligation is beginning to feel like a curse. So where does that leave us? As Earth suffocates under its own success, we're left to ask, if this is what survival looks like, was it ever worth it? In our conclusion, we'll explore the final cost of unchecked growth, and why sometimes restraint is the most revolutionary act. A world with 100 billion people isn't a celebration of life, it's a warning. What begins as human success, longer lives, medical triumphs, technological breakthroughs, eventually spirals into claustrophobic survival. Individuality is erased, nature is gone, freedom is measured in efficiency units. The world doesn't collapse in fire or war, but in quiet, calculated over-optimization. In this future, we learn that more is not always better. That growth, without limits, becomes suffocation. That intelligence doesn't always mean wisdom, and that survival, at this scale, might be the loneliest existence of all. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest act of human progress isn't expanding endlessly, but learning when to stop. If this vision made you think twice about humanity's path forward, imagine how many more possibilities are out there, terrifying, beautiful, and unreal. This channel dives deep into the wildest what-if futures, and we're just getting started. So, if you're fascinated by alternate realities, dystopian forecasts, and the fragile line between order and collapse, subscribe for more mind-bending scenarios. Like the video to help it reach others. Comment below. What do you think would really happen if Earth had 100 billion people? What would you miss most? We read every theory, every idea, and yours might shape our next deep dive. Until then, stay curious and imagine boldly.